All right, everyone. It has become quite self-evident that liberals are in denial at this point, specifically about crime rates. Now, it is true that the peak of crime in the United States, per capita, of course, really happened from the 70s to the 90s, and then it begins to peter off around the 2000s. Ironically, I have a feeling that some of the crime reduction was the result of 9/11 more than anything else. You get people who are signing up for the military, who maybe they have a rap sheet and stuff like that. They have no nothing else that they can possibly do. You have, of course, the beginnings of the economic shocks of that particular era. People are making less money, they can't find a job, so they join the military. You have a renewed sense of togetherness, unity, patriotism, although a faux one, of course. And so I think that that helped to slowly absorb some of the crime rate. You also have other things that happen too. For instance, the economy rebounds. You get a little shaky with the Great Recession. But, everyone's like, yeah, well, we're kind of all in this together. That being said, crime rates, I like that article from the other day that I referenced on my live stream, where they're like, well, Donald Trump is wrong about DC crime. It was way worse in 1968. No shit, Sherlock, when you have a bunch of race riots and stuff like that. It might lead to higher crime. Overall, though, the crime rate in our cities is too high. It is considerably higher than cities in many parts of the world. I would like to believe that the United States is capable of looking at the methodologies that are used in some of these other countries and applying them to try to reduce crime. In the meantime, you're going to need a cleanup effort. And when the legacy media, link in the description archived, of course, says, well, Trump's just being alarmist. There's not that much crime. Keep in mind where the people writing these articles tend to live. They're in gated communities and penthouses and nice neighborhoods and things like that. They're not living in the ghetto. They don't have to see the crime that occurs. They don't have to suffer from the effects of that crime. Secondarily, maybe they do. They're just too stupid to realize that, but they're not living in the crack shack. The people writing these articles are not in the crack shack. They're not in the heroin den. They're living in upper middle class to upper class neighborhoods, generally speaking. Sometimes in literal like mansions and shit like that. Those are the people that are conducting much of the legacy media journalism. When you have a hundreds of millions of dollars budget, you can generally pay people enough so that they're capable of living in a reasonably nice neighborhood, maybe middle class neighborhood or something. Liberal commentators, if you look at all the astroturfed, dweebs that are creating content saying Donald Trump, orange man bad, there is no crime problem. Yeah, I'm sure there's no crime problem in your neighborhood where you can leave your door unlocked and the kids wander around at midnight. I'm sure that there's not a whole lot of crime there. When a crime does happen there, it's front page news for a reason. Whereas if 12 people get shot in the ghetto in Chicago today, which is, probably an underestimation, none of it makes the news. It's basically like I remember going to Tampa, for example, and this was way back. This is far pre-Trump, but it's an example of reporting differentials. I'm here in Vermont, and the news of the day is basically someone tipped over a couple of cows or something like that. Here's grandma's raspberry jam recipe. Here's how to make raspberry jam. You go down to Tampa, and there were so many killings and other considerable crimes. So we're not talking jaywalking or something like that. We're talking, somebody went crazy on fentanyl and hit someone in the head with a bat or something like that. It was so there were so incredibly many of them that they would have like a little segment, and it would just be like a brief summary of all of the crimes that had been committed overnight or in the last few hours. And that took up, sometimes a half an hour of the news reporting. It was very, very strange to me as somebody who had lived maybe a sheltered existence in northern New England in a predominantly peaceful region. Supposedly, Rutland is now one of the most dangerous cities in the United States. You're nuts if you think that that's actually true, by the way. Liberals are in denial. And public sentiment plays a big role in this. They are in denial that the public is on their side with regards to crime crackdowns, because people in urban areas disproportionately affected by said crime are getting tired of having to fucking deal with it. Their city governments won't do anything. The federal government up till now hasn't done anything. Their state governments are the most inept of all. And oftentimes the police forces are corrupt anyway, so they're not going to really be incentivized to put their life on the line when they'd be going after the people that are literally giving them the drugs that they're reselling and shit like that. And this happens, mainly again in urban enclaves. This is, by the way, a thankless job for Donald Trump. Donald Trump is attempting to clean up mainly urban areas. Well, what's the problem? Those urban areas are going to continue to vote generally heavily blue. It does not matter if you take the criminals off the streets. He's not going to get thanked for it by the white liberal class because they don't live in the communities mostly affected by this crime. Unless they happen to be a business owner and, hey, I'm on my 10th break-in of the month and people walk in and shoplift and I'm not allowed to do anything about it. I think that some minds are being changed by that more than anything else. But the liberals are in denial about public sentiment regarding this. It doesn't matter if the crime rate's lower than it was in 1968 or something like that, like ancient history mode. Back when the boomers were getting ready to go to their rock concert in Woodstock, or something like that. It doesn't matter. Nobody cares. They care about the crime rate here and now. They care about the things that are impacting them personally. This is how most people operate. Same with the economy. Well, the economy is not growing as fast as it was in 1954. It's something like that. That would be like the most tedious thing you could get, and I wouldn't be surprised if we get such an article. It doesn't matter. What matters is what's happening here and now to people who are alive today. Most of the people that were alive in 1968 are deceased. Just to be clear, more than half of them are gone. If they were adults at the time, maybe if they were born in 1968, that's a little bit different. They're getting elderly now, but they're still alive. But people who were of age back then, and many of whom fought in Vietnam and shit like that, that is a declining sum total of the population. So the fact that they can remember the crime waves and all the gritty movies, some of which were really good, by the way, in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, most of those people, I mean, they've gone through it, but most of them are gone. People that were born, maybe in the 70s or something. Okay, they're young enough still. Most of them are still alive. That cohort is still there. But I don't think that trying to extrapolate past crime data to the current era and saying, well, things are better than they could be. That's not what Trump has in mind, and it's not what the average American has in mind. What the average American has in mind is let's improve the situation. Can we make the crime rate lower? And by the way, you've got fudgy crime statistics anyway. They're constantly changing the definition of what crime is. And, you've got all sorts of, you've got overcharging, you've got undercharging, you've got differential enforcement, et cetera, et cetera. The crime rate is notably worse than what you're getting from the statistics. I hate to tell you. Especially in places like DC, Chicago, Detroit, in the Fort Wayne area, certainly. Los Angeles, the big cities mainly. Trump has the thankless job of ingratiating himself to people who are never going to vote for him simply because he's being a pragmatist. And that crime has been bleeding out, by the way, into local communities as well. It's been bleeding out of the metropolitan areas into adjacent areas, especially with regards to trafficking in drugs and sex. So Trump is trying to stop this. And now it looks like he might send the National Guard to New York City, actually, which I think is a good idea, with a caveat that I'll explain on today's live stream. That's about all. Peace out.